She just wanted to buy a bracelet for her grandfather. But in a world where worth is measured by credit cards and brand names, her sincerity was mocked and humiliated. Little did they know, the man they were about to ridicule as her husband was the owner of it all. On the glossy escalators leading to the top floor of Manhattan's grand shopping center, Emily Dawson paused for a moment, her hand lightly gripping the frayed strap of her canvas bag. She wore a simple light blue blouse, faded jeans, and worn-out flats with heels rubbed thin. Amid the crowd draped in fur coats and carrying Italian leather bags, moving with the confident stride of those accustomed to black cards and crystal chandeliers, Emily felt like a discordant note. But she wasn't ashamed. She was here for a reason no designer brand could ever replace. Walter Dawson, her grandfather, the man who raised her in place of her parents, was about to turn 70. He was the one who taught her that the most precious gifts weren't measured by their price but by the sincerity behind them. She had considered many things, a warm coat, a vintage book, even a handwritten letter, but when she recalled how he carefully dusted the small jade statues on his altar, his eyes sparkling like a child unwrapping a gift, she knew she had to find something special made of jade. That was why she stood before the Jade Pavilion, New York's most renowned jade shop. A single glance through the glass revealed a world inside that glimmered like an ancient treasure trove. Solid jade Buddha statues, bracelets etched with lotus patterns, and gemstone necklaces shimmering under white lights. A faint scent of incense wafted through the air, gentle and serene, a stark contrast to the clamor outside. She stepped inside. The glass doors slid open with a soft ding, like a note signaling the start of a journey she couldn't yet predict. Inside, the marble floor gleamed. The staff in crisp vests exuded refinement, and everything radiated an air of expense and distance. But Emily remained calm. Despite a few skeptical glances cast her way, she moved slowly, gazing at each display as if selecting a sacred item for a solemn ritual. Her heart stirred when she spotted a small string of beads, each carved with a lotus flower, the same flower Walter Dawson lovingly grew on his tiny balcony. She didn't rush to ask the price. For her, the value lay in the image of her grandfather's smile when he received it, his trembling hands cradling the gift, his warm eyes silently giving thanks. She only needed something that matched her love, no matter how small. Outside, Manhattan continued its noisy rhythm, but within Emily Dawson was a quiet warmth, where the image of her grandfather lived, the man who taught her that sincerity, when placed in the right moment, would always shine, even in a world that only saw surface glitter. Barely a few minutes after Emily Dawson stepped into Jade Pavilion, a man in a charcoal gray vest approached her swiftly. His smile was practiced, polite on the surface, but laced with an unmistakable scrutiny. On his chest, a gold-plated name tag gleamed, Brent Whitman, store manager. "Good afternoon, miss. Can I assist you?" His voice rang out, courteous to the point of artifice. Brent Whitman's gaze swept over Emily, lingering briefly on her worn-out shoes before moving to her simply tied hair. Emily offered a small smile, keeping her tone friendly. "I'm looking for a jade bracelet, maybe a string of prayer beads. It's for my grandfather's 70th birthday." She didn't need to say more. For Emily, memories of Walter Dawson surfaced whenever she saw jade prayer beads. She recalled afternoons when he sat by the porch, gently turning each small bead in his hands, his eyes pensive, lips murmuring something she couldn't quite hear. She wanted to find something with that kind of meaning, but Brent Whitman didn't see that. What he saw was a girl, dressed inappropriately, asking about an item he assumed was far beyond her budget. "Prayer beads. Yes, of course, we have those," he said, his hand gesturing with an exaggerated flourish, as if addressing a high society patron. "Please, follow me." Emily trailed him along the gleaming glass counters. She glanced at the displayed items. Buddha statues, lotus motifs, protective charms, all carved with such exquisite precision they seemed almost otherworldly. Stopping at a central display case, Brent Whitman pulled out a ring of keys, making a show of selecting the right one when it was clearly just for effect. He retrieved 3 strings of beads, each resting elegantly on black velvet. "These are new arrivals," he said, his eyes gleaming with a pride not meant for Emily. "Top-grade jade, flawless clarity, with a rare natural green hue, imported, perfect for significant occasions." She nodded, her fingers lightly brushing the smooth beads. She wasn't an expert on jade, but something about them felt right, as if each stone whispered a quiet prayer. "They range from $100,000 0 cents to $200 0 cents, Brent Whitman said casually. The words landed like a blade slicing through the fragile skin of her dignity. Emily froze for a moment. She knew Jade Pavilion wasn't a base for bargains, but that price was far beyond anything she could have imagined. "Oh," she tried to stay composed, her smile not yet fading. "I don't think I can afford that. Are there any options for less, maybe under $15,000? 0 cents? A brief silence followed. Brent Whitman's expression shifted. Though he didn't say it outright, his look spoke volumes. "You don't belong here." The moment Emily Dawson mentioned under $15 0 cents, the air in the shop seemed to vanish. Brent Whitman's lips curled into a slow, suggestive smirk, dissolving into a soft but unmistakably scornful snort. "Under 15,000? He enunciated each word, as if naming some peculiar ailment. "I'm afraid," he paused deliberately, "we do have a few items at that price, but they're not exactly suitable for a momentous occasion like a 70th birthday. You understand, quality reflects honor." Emily stayed silent, not out of shame for her limited means, but because she could feel the icy sting in his gaze, each veiled remark implying she'd dishonor her grandfather, Walter Dawson, by daring to buy something so inexpensive. "But anyway," Brent Whitman continued, his tone shifting to a patronizing, "I'm very understanding" drawl. "Follow me. I'll show you to a more suitable section." He turned, walking leisurely like a guide leading a guest to a basement of discounted goods. Emily followed, her eyes scanning the space as if trying to hold onto the feeling of standing by the central display, where radiant light bathed shimmering jade beads like tiny galaxies. They stopped at a corner of the store, where the lighting was dimmer, the glass cases bore faint scratches, and the jade pieces sat plainly on faded gray velvet trays. Here, there was no background music, no wafting incense, only a somber air that felt resigned. "This is where we display our more accessible items," Brent Whitman said, not bothering to mask his disdain. "Still jade, of course, but not the kind chosen for grand occasions." Though his words cut like a blade, Emily Dawson didn't react. She leaned down, quietly studying the lower-tier bracelets. One caught her eye, sketched with lotus flowers, its green, uneven with faint cracks within the jade. Yet to her it held a rustic beauty, much like the simplicity Walter Dawson always cherished. She touched the beads. The jade was cool under her fingers. She could picture her grandfather wearing it, seated in his old wooden chair by the window, afternoon light filtering through the trees and glinting softly off the beads. Behind her, Brent Whitman's shoes tapped rhythmically on the marble floor. He let out a faint sigh, a performative display of enduring a customer unworthy of his service. "I have other guests to attend to," he said without turning back. "If you still wish to pick something from here, just call a staff member. Otherwise, perhaps a more modest shop would suit you better." Emily didn't reply. She only nodded gently, continuing to admire the beads as if she'd just heard a cold breeze pass by. Chilling, but not strong enough to shake someone accustomed to living with humility. As Emily Dawson bent down, gently tracing the simple string of beads in the dim corner of the shop, a sharp, cold laugh pierced the air. The clack of high heels struck the marble floor like a rhythm for a fashion show, accompanied by the heavy scent of expensive perfume, the kind not meant for someone carrying a faded canvas bag. "Oh, look who we have here," a female voice rang out, high-pitched and sweet to the point of bitterness. I thought it was a stockroom cleaner, but turns out it's a customer." Emily looked up and her heart tightened. Standing in the dazzling light of the central display was Brielle Stanton, radiant with platinum blonde hair swept into a flawless updo, a black Balmain bodycon dress hugging her frame, and eyes brimming with contempt. Beside her was a woman anyone would recognize, Aubrey Sinclair, the actress with a face so perfect it made you question time itself. She didn't smile, but the slight curl of her lips and the tilt of her chin delivered a blow sharper than any words. Trailing them were three other women, Lena Monroe, Vivian Hale, and Maya Quinn, names that regularly graced the Style Watch and Drama of the Week columns in magazines. The group strutted as if on a red carpet, each step carrying the confidence of a class that had never known rejection. Brielle Stanton marched straight toward Emily, her gaze flicking over the faded blouse before settling on the scuffed soles of her shoes. "My goodness," she gasped, feigning surprise. "Isn't that Emily Dawson? I can't believe you made it to a place like this. Lost your way? Or are you here begging for charity donations?" One of the three women behind her let out a stifled giggle, as if on cue, while Aubrey Sinclair stood poised, silent but clearly passing judgment. Emily didn't belong here. "Hi," Emily said, her voice steady despite the effort. "I'm looking for a birthday gift for my grandfather." "Oh, how sweet." Brielle nodded with mock sincerity. "So meaningful, but won't your grandfather be embarrassed if his granddaughter gives him something cheap from a place like Jade Pavilion?" Lena Monroe chimed in. "She's probably planning to buy a piece of jade, like the scraps left over after they cut the real stuff. Or maybe," Vivian Hale added, "she thinks sincerity can be paid for with a low-limit debit card." Laughter erupted again, this time rippling through the display area like a small wave. Emily Dawson didn't respond. She tightened her grip on her bag's strap, her eyes still fixed on the lotus-carved beads, the only thing in the room that didn't judge her. Just as the tension began to thin, diffused by the awkward glances of nearby staff, a figure appeared. Brent Whitman, the same manager with his polished smile. But this time he wasn't there for Emily. "A pleasure to see you, Miss Sinclair, and you as well, Miss Stanton," he said, bowing eagerly. "I'll have the latest collection brought out, items reserved exclusively for our VIPs." And just like that, the stage shifted. The staff's attention swung toward the glamorous group, the lights seeming to follow them, while Emily Dawson remained in her dim corner, a background character in a play she'd never signed up for. But in her hand, the string of beads stayed, and within her, so did her resolve. After the loud mockery from Brielle Stanton's group, Emily Dawson turned her focus back to the display in the shadowed corner. She refused to be swept into the stage others had set to ridicule her. She didn't need the spotlight. She needed a gift for Walter Dawson, something that could express a lifetime of gratitude for being raised in quiet, steadfast love. A string of lotus-carved beads lay still in the worn glass case. Its color wasn't flawless, streaked with faint white, speckled with tiny black flecks deep within the jade, but to Emily it was as sincere as her grandfather's weathered hands patiently tending his lotus pots through sun or rain. "Excuse me?" she called softly, her gaze settling on a nearby female employee, the only one who hadn't sneered or bowed to the glamorous crowd. The name tag glinted faintly. Rachel Brooks. Rachel approached, her eyes cautious but warm enough. Emily pointed at the beads. "This one, it's carved with lotuses, right? Is it within the $15,000 0 cents range?" Rachel nodded gently. "Yes, it's listed at $15 0 cents, but I think, if you'd like, we could apply a small discount for the holiday season." Before she could finish, a shadow swept in like a summer storm. "Brent Whitman. Who gave you the authority to say that, Rachel?" His voice was sharp as honed stone, cutting openly in front of the customer. "Do you think you can just set prices as you please?" Rachel Brooks shrank back as if doused with ice water, her eyes flustered but unresisting. Emily Dawson stood up. "She was only helping me understand." You?" Brent Whitman interrupted, turning his scornful gaze on Emily. "Are you seriously buying that, or are you just browsing before backing out?" "No," Emily replied, her voice soft but firm. "I want to buy it. If possible, I'll pay now." He let out a faint laugh, the kind reserved for those who don't believe what they've heard, then clicked his tongue. "Fine, go ahead and try, but I'll warn you, we don't accept declined cards here." In the distance, Brielle, Stanton, and Aubrey Sinclair had clearly overheard. Lena Monroe covered her mouth, giggling. "Careful, what if it's a borrowed card? That'd be messy. Or maybe it's a rewards card from a supermarket." Vivian Hale added, sparking laughter that spread like an oil slick. Emily didn't react. She turned back to the display, opened her wallet, and carefully pulled out cash and a card. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze was steady as a mirror. "I'll pay with both," she said, "and I'd like a receipt, like any other customer." Brent Whitman stared at her for a few seconds, then jerked his head toward the checkout counter. "Whatever. But if it doesn't go through, don't waste our time." Perhaps he thought she'd falter, but Emily Dawson stayed silent, her hand still clutching the beads. Not the priciest item in the room, but the only one holding the last shred of dignity amid faces powdered with privilege. Emily Dawson stood at the checkout counter, the lotus-carved beads in her hand, her palms slightly damp with sweat. The cash was carefully counted, the worn, edged debit card nestled in her wallet, and her heart, the heart of a woman who only wanted to give her grandfather a meaningful gift, beat with cautious resolve. She glanced around. Brent Whitman had just walked away after his icy remark. "Don't waste our time." He strode toward the central display, where Brielle, Stanton, Aubrey Sinclair, and their entourage were surrounded by trays of premium tea and exorbitant jewelry. Their deference was a service with a price tag, and Emily clearly wasn't on the priority list. But amid that scene, a soft voice spoke beside her. "If you'd like, I can try to apply a 10% discount. The holiday season is coming, and this item is part of our periodic promotions." Emily turned. It was Rachel Brooks, the young employee whose eyes hadn't yet been clouded by prejudice or sycophancy. Despite the risk of reprimand, she stood there, hesitant but sincere. Emily smiled, so faintly it was almost just a breath between her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. "I really appreciate it." Rachel nodded, about to step toward the computer to check the discount when a voice cut through from behind, hard as a hammer striking glass. "What did I say about handling prices on your own?" Brent Whitman was back, his eyes blazing with anger, not over some grand offense, but because someone dared to disrupt his machine, where only service to the elite deserved priority. Rachel Brooks flinched, her shoulders pulling back like a small bird startled by a loud noise. "I just thought—" "Don't think, do your job," Brent Whitman snapped, his voice tightening, then turned to Emily with his usual disdain. "If you're actually buying, pay up. I'm not wasting another second on this cheap trinket." Emily Dawson didn't reply. She was used to being looked at as if she didn't exist, but this time she held on to the warm light from Rachel Brooks' small act of kindness. She placed the beads on the counter, opened her wallet, counted each bill meticulously, and handed over her card. "I'll pay with both," she said, calm as if the group of wealthy women casting sidelong glances didn't exist, as if the manager's hissed words weren't there, as if the weight of class disparity wasn't hanging like a blade in the air. Rachel quietly moved to the computer, starting to process the order. She glanced at Brent Whitman, waiting for a reaction, but he had already walked off, engrossed in fawning over Aubrey Sinclair as if Emily Dawson had never been a customer. In that moment, Emily knew. Some things in life didn't need to be grand to touch the heart. A string of beads, a kind word, or a look free of judgment. They were small, but their value far surpassed the jade displayed under lavish lights. As Emily Dawson handed her card to Rachel Brooks, anxiously awaiting the card reader's response, the glass door's chime rang out again. The door swung open slowly, and in that moment the atmosphere in Jade Pavilion seemed to shift. An older man stepped inside, salt and pepper hair swept back, a navy suit tailored to perfection, polished leather shoes glinting, and a stride that was unhurried yet commanded the room to part for him. Behind him followed two young assistants in crisp white shirts, wearing internal name tags from King Corporation. None of the junior staff recognized him immediately, but Rachel Brooks froze. She leaned toward Emily, whispering, "That's Robert Matthews, Senior Director of King Corp., the overseer of this retail chain." Before Emily could respond, he walked straight toward her. Ignoring Brent Whitman, paying no mind to the laughter from Brielle Stanton's group, he stopped before her, his gaze stern but not cold. "Miss," Robert Matthews said, his voice low but clear, like a gentle command. "I see you're choosing a gift. May I assist you in any way?" Brent Whitman, from the central display, flinched when he recognized the face. He hurried over, his expression strained, like someone who'd just realized they'd misnamed their boss. "Good day, Mr. Matthews. Are you here to meet Miss Sinclair? She's over—" "No." Robert Matthews cut him off without turning. "I'm here to address a matter in this store, and I'm dealing with this customer." He looked at Emily Dawson, his stern gaze softening slightly. "I witnessed the entire exchange. The right to shop here doesn't depend on attire or the money one carries. It depends on how they're treated." The air seemed to freeze. Brielle Stanton's group fell abruptly silent. Aubrey Sinclair raised an eyebrow, not surprised but clearly losing interest in the earlier game of humiliation. Brent Whitman swallowed hard, trying to stay composed. "Sir, I was merely ensuring top-tier service for our VIP clients. I thought she might not be satisfied with second-rate items, so I—" "And so," Robert Matthews interrupted, "you assumed the right to belittle a customer, to humiliate her in front of others? If that's your definition of top-tier service, then I'm afraid our entire approach needs reevaluation." Silence enveloped the room. Every employee paused, curious eyes turned toward Matthews and toward Emily. The only one standing tall, not with pride, but without bowing her head. Robert Matthews leaned toward her. "If you still want this bracelet, I'll personally handle the transaction. Or if you'd like to see other options within your budget, I'd be happy to show you." Emily hesitated. In her heart, the heavy winds of humiliation seemed to dissipate. She looked at the lotus bracelet, then back at Robert Matthews with softened eyes. "If it's not too much trouble, I'd like this one," she said quietly. "It's simple, but it's exactly what I want to give." Robert Matthews nodded, as solemnly as if receiving a vow. "Then allow me to finalize this transaction myself, and I'll ensure that from this day forward, you'll never be denied the respect you deserve, here or anywhere else." As Robert Matthews nodded and stepped aside, making space for the only customer who truly mattered to him in that moment, Emily Dawson felt as though a layer of fog had been lifted from the air. Not because the room suddenly grew warmer. The judgmental stares lingered. The mocking laughter hadn't fully faded, but because for the first time someone stood by her, not for her appearance but for her true worth. Emily placed the lotus-carved bracelet on the glass counter. She pulled out the cash she'd prepared, each bill neatly folded, pristine, reflecting the care in her decision to spend her entire savings. She added her card, its edges chipped and worn. "I'll cover the rest with this," she said softly, her eyes unwavering. "I've calculated it to be enough." Across the counter, Brent Whitman approached silently, forced to process the transaction under his superior's watchful eye. His hands moved stiffly, each keystroke like a slap to the pride he was accustomed to having flattered. The card reader beeped steadily, then fell silent for a few seconds that made Emily's heart clench. A brief moment, but long enough for her to imagine turning away. Brielle Stanton's gaze pinning her as if she'd been caught with a fake card. Vivian Hale's mocking laugh, or Maya Quinn's pitying tisk, as if bestowing charity on someone from another world. Beep, the receipt printer whirred to life. She exhaled, almost imperceptibly. "Payment successful," Rachel Brooks confirmed gently, speaking before Brent Whitman could. She stepped forward, wrapping the bracelet in tissue paper and a velvet box, each movement precise and respectful, as if packaging a gift for her own loved one. Emily Dawson took the box, not glancing at the group in the distance, not turning toward the manager, not needing any thanks from the man who'd wanted her gone. She only said to Rachel, "Thank you for your kindness." Rachel smiled. "Not everyone sees the true value in others, but I'm glad you didn't let them make you forget yours." The clack of high heels echoed behind her. Brielle Stanton, unwilling to let it go, spoke up. "Well, how impressive, buying a cheap piece of jade with her entire wallet and the last scraps of her dignity." Emily didn't turn back. She only tightened her grip on the gift box, as if holding fast to the memories, gratitude, and resolve meant for Walter Dawson. The one person who'd taught her that, sometimes, self-respect is the most precious gift you can keep for yourself. She walked out of Jade Pavilion in silence, not in loud triumph, not to applause, but in the quiet of someone who knew she'd passed through a storm, on her own 2 feet, needing no one to lift her up. The small paper bag bearing the Jade Pavilion logo rested neatly in Emily Dawson's hand, the velvet box inside shifting slightly as she walked slowly across the marble floor. Everything was done. The transaction was complete, the gift for Walter Dawson carefully packaged. She had no reason to linger here, but others weren't ready to let her go. "Wow!" Brielle Stanton's voice rang out behind her, sweet as honey dripping over a razor blade. "You actually did it! Bought a real item here! Bravo!" Emily didn't pause. "No need to thank me," Brielle continued, her eyes sharp despite the playful tone. "I know how it feels to be propped up by someone with real power. Mr. Matthews must taken quite a pity on you." A laugh came from behind. Maybe Lena Monroe or Vivian Hale. Hard to tell since their laughter sounded eerily alike, hollow and grating. Emily Dawson stopped, but didn't turn. She tilted her head just enough for her voice to carry back. "I don't need anyone's pity," she said, light as a breeze but clear in every word. "I just need respect, and fortunately I got that from someone who knows right from wrong." Silence stretched for nearly a breath. Brielle Stanton faltered briefly, her chin lifting higher than usual, as if to mask a flicker of unease, but within seconds her mask of arrogance was reapplied. "Fine, but if you think a discounted trinket and a few words of defense can make you somebody in this world, well, that's just sad." Emily didn't respond. Instead, she faced forward and resumed walking toward the door. Each step was light but steady. She didn't need applause, didn't need a spotlight, didn't need anyone to declare her the victor. Sometimes the greatest glory wasn't in being celebrated. It was in remaining whole after every attempt to break you. As her hand reached the door handle, one last remark came from Vivian Hale, quiet but deliberately loud enough to hear. "Well, if she gets treated like that, next time anyone can waltz in here in pajamas and buy high-end stuff." Emily Dawson smiled, not because the comment was funny, but because she realized those who resort to petty words to prove their superiority are, in truth, standing far below her. She said nothing, didn't look back. She pushed the door and stepped outside. Beyond, the early afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, stretching across Manhattan's sidewalks. The world was still noisy, but within Emily all was calm. The gift was chosen. Her dignity was intact, and those who needed to know now knew exactly who she was. The glass revolving door of Jade Pavilion had just closed behind Emily Dawson when another hand touched the handle from the outside. A faint chime sounded as the door opened again. But this time, no one in the shop could ignore it, because the person who stepped in was unlike anyone who had appeared that day. A tall man with dark hair neatly combed, his chiseled face sharp as if carved, clad in a charcoal suit that clung to his athletic frame with icy precision, the open collar revealing a calculated nonchalance. 2 bodyguards trailed him like synchronized shadows, earpieces in place, their eyes scanning the room as if every detail could be a threat. No one needed to ask his name. A single glance, a single look from him was enough to spark whispers. Alexander Alex Bennett, CEO of King Corporation, the owner of the Jade Pavilion chain, a man whom men like Brent Whitman never dreamed would personally visit a district-level branch, and he had walked in just as Brent was busy offering tea to Aubrey Sinclair. The smile on Brent Whitman's face froze solid, like ice in the height of summer. "Mr. Bennett," he stammered, abruptly abandoning his conversation. What an unexpected honor." Alexander Alex Bennett didn't respond. He didn't look at Brent. He didn't glance at Brielle Stanton, who was smoothing her hair and sitting up straighter as if switching on her charm. He didn't spare a look for Aubrey Sinclair, who rarely deigned to notice others but now raised an eyebrow, sizing him up in return. His gaze was fixed on one person alone, and she had just stepped outside, leaving the door not yet fully closed. Slowly he walked to the center of the room. No words, no background music, no introduction needed. His presence surged like an undercurrent, not loud, but forcing silence upon everyone. Rachel Brooks stood rooted behind the counter. Robert Matthews, though he'd left earlier, had never commanded the room to hold its breath like this. And just as Brent Whitman regained a shred of composure, about to speak, Alexander finally opened his mouth. "It seems someone here today forgot who truly owns this place." His voice was low, not raised, but each word landed like a heavy stone. Every employee bowed their head. Every gaze shifted. Brent Whitman paled. Brielle Stanton flushed red. Aubrey Sinclair pursed her lips, for once not wanting to be the center of anything. Alexander walked straight to the counter, his fingers lightly brushing the gift box Emily Dawson had left behind on the glass case during payment. He lifted it with surprising gentleness, as if it held not just jade but something far more sacred. He turned, facing the room. "The last customer here today," he said, "was my wife." That was all. One sentence. A clean, razor-sharp cut through every illusion of hierarchy. The stage collapsed. No more words were needed. Only silence remained. And sovereignty. The story of Emily Dawson and Alexander Alex Bennett reminds us that dignity and kindness always hold their worth, even when underestimated. Thank you for watching Millionaire and Heart Stories. See you again in our next heartfelt journey.